tonight on 2020 with Barbara Walters and John Miller. We did it for women like this one.
I totally felt violated and dirty and cheap.
Girlfriends and daughters, their rapists never caught. Then 2020 got involved. We paid for DNA tests police say they can't afford.
We have 4 positive hits, absolutely the guy. And we had one man who was actually found to be innocent, who was in jail.
Something never done before gets results. Watch us sweep the streets with police and help crack unsolved cases. From Times Square in New York, Barbara Walters and John Miller.
Good evening, and welcome to 2020. We start with this horrifying statistic. Every 6 minutes, a woman is raped in this country. And too often, the rapist goes free. Why? Well, it's obvious that something must be done. And 2020 did something that we've never done before. We teamed up with the police, and the result brought about changes in the way police departments across America investigate rape cases. It's amazing, John.
And Barbara, the fact that 2020 worked with the police was very controversial, but we finally uncovered the truth about why so many rapists stay on the street. And the key to everything is DNA. How so? Well, we begin with the story of one woman who was brave enough to come forward, whose rape case is scheduled to go to trial this fall. Our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, has the story.
I called my boyfriend before I left and said I'm on my way home. I was working as a sports producer at NBC. Walked up 6th Avenue towards the park. My purse had fallen to the crook of my elbow, and I looked down to pick it up. And he was right there. Put his arm around me and said, "Don't scream, I've got a gun, and I want to..." And I said, "Okay," and I just remember, starting to pray, saying, "Just send me my guardian angels and help me get through this."
It was Christmas time in New York City, near Rockefeller Center, 2.5 years ago, and a young woman's life would be changed forever.
So he took me across the street to a stairwell. And he led me down. He raped me. He sodomized me. He hit me around. My lip was busted. I had a cut down my face. I had a bruised nose. He kept backhanding me. And I just remember my boyfriend telling me, "You're still beautiful." And I remember walking into the bathroom, and I saw myself for the first time, and I didn't feel beautiful. I totally felt violated and dirty and cheap.
She was 25 years old and newly arrived from Texas. And when we first interviewed her, she asked that her identity be hidden. But now, with her accused rapist about to go on trial, Christy Collier wants her name and her face to be known, to tell the story that so devastated her, to help expose why so many rapists remain on the street to strike again when they could be easily caught.
If he did this to me, he could do it to somebody else. And it changes your life. When you are raped, it changes your world.
It was here last night.
Her case shows how it can be done.
A woman on her way home.
The search for the rapist began that very night. After the rape, he had taken his victim to a cash machine, where a surveillance camera took these pictures. But the quality was too poor to help detectives.
This guy was a ghost. For the longest time, I really didn't think we were ever going to get it.
But the breakthrough came in a New York City crime lab, recently expanded to process rape case evidence such as clothing, semen, and saliva. A tiny bit of the unknown rapist's semen recovered the night of the crime, produced a DNA sample. And 18 months later, police say there was a match in the DNA database of known criminals. And Christie was called in for a lineup.
It was him. And when we got him, I finally felt a little bit of me had won.
Thanks to the DNA. But it turns out that for all of its effectiveness, this remarkably simple and reliable procedure, testing for DNA, is rarely used by police in rape cases where they may need it most, where the suspect is unknown to the victim.
In probably 90% of the country, if you're raped by somebody who you don't know, by a stranger, the probability is that that rape kit will not get tested at all for DNA.
Never tested?
Never.
In fact, an investigation by 2020 has found that hundreds of thousands of rape evidence kits sit unprocessed on dusty shelves in police storage rooms around the country, simply because police say they can't afford the cost to process them. On average, no more than $500 a kit.
That's outrageous. I mean, it says to a woman who's a victim, we don't care.
Former New York City Police Commissioner Hubert Taylor says he greatly expanded his department's DNA rape testing after a prominent lawyer told him the NYPD had 12,000 unprocessed rape kits.
I thought he was insane. And I looked into it. I didn't have 12,000. I had 16,000.
And your estimate nationwide?
I believe there's 500,000.
If they were to be analyzed, processed, and run, what would you guess would be the number of suspects identified?
Tens of thousands.
A dirty little secret of American law enforcement, unknown to victims and their families in one city after another. The parents of Charlene Hardin of Baltimore had waited 12 years for the man who raped and killed their daughter to be caught.
She's missed because actually it was our only child. You know, we have no other kids.
They did not know that the evidence gathered by police at their daughter's crime scene in 1989 had sat untested and essentially forgotten in an envelope in the basement evidence room of the Baltimore Police Department. Baltimore Police Commissioner Ed Norris.
This department alone, we have about 2,600 unanalyzed rape kits just sitting there waiting for someone to look at them. Why is that? Money.
To see if that really was the case, 2020 asked the Baltimore Police to help us in a unique demonstration project. We offered to pay half the cost of processing DNA evidence kits from some 50 unsolved cases, known as cold cases, to be selected and handled by the Baltimore Police with no input at all from 2020.
It seemed like a great opportunity to push this to the fore.
The 50 evidence kits from Baltimore were sent to one of the country's leading private DNA labs, the Bodie Labs in Springfield, Virginia, where former NYPD Commissioner Safer is a consultant and helped to arrange it. The results were then entered into both state and federal criminal databases to see if there was a match. And even the experts were surprised. Results in 5 major unsolved rape cases.
We physically jumped out of our chairs. I mean, this is big stuff.
Detectives moved out immediately, first looking for a man linked by the DNA tests to the unsolved rapes of 2 teenage girls 4 years ago.
We've got his car, we've got his house, we know where he works.
It took a citywide search and then a 4-hour stakeout of the suspect's car. Shortly before 7, the man, identified as Hubert Taylor, finally showed up, unaware police were waiting for him. Detectives moved in and put handcuffs on Taylor,
You want your fingers for me?
whose DNA was in the system because of a minor drug arrest in Virginia.
What is this? You have an arrest warrant for you, Mr. Taylor. For what? For rape. Oh, for rape.
But last month, after pleading guilty, Taylor was sentenced to 30 years in prison, clearing 2 rape cases for which evidence had been available but never processed.
Had you not come forward, that evidence would be on the shelf.
But perhaps most satisfying to police was the ability to process the evidence from the rape and murder of Charlene Hardin 12 years ago.
The case was absolutely cold. There was nothing on that for years. We had absolutely nothing to go on.
She was killed on her way home from her first job out of high school, just before Christmas in 1989, 2 blocks from where she lived with her parents.
I got to that point, I was wondering if they would ever catch anybody for my daughter's killing, you know.
Until the DNA results in our demonstration project came back and police said they had identified the murderer. 39-year-old Anthony Mitchell, already serving time for robbery and attempted rape. After being confronted with the DNA evidence, Mitchell pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and rape, and just this month was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Once faced with the dead endness, the one-way street of DNA, what is there to argue with?
After 12 years, detectives were finally able to go to the home of Charlene Hardin's parents and tell them they had caught the man who murdered their daughter.
It brings a little sense of closure to me, you know. It's always going to be in the back of my mind, but I do feel a lot better now, you know.
But the fifth and final DNA case was also an important one. It didn't put someone in jail, it got someone out, a man wrongly identified by a rape victim.
Sample was submitted, not the guy. So it's just important to us to get obviously more important, get an innocent man out of jail who should not be there, as is put a guilty man into prison.
Should it really be that 2020 has to finance the solution of these crimes?
No, this is responsibility of government. There's been a lot of talk about it, but, little action.
My kit was tested. We caught my guy. He's not a ghost, and I won part of my life back. It makes me so angry that so many women can't get over these things unless their guy's caught, and they're just waiting. And these kids are just sitting there.
But here's some good news. Just today, a new foundation, the National Rape Evidence Project, has been established by New York City's former police commissioner, Howard Safer. And the foundation's mission is to raise funds to expedite the testing of DNA evidence. Maybe other cities can do that.
Well, after our story, the city of Baltimore got $350,000 and then matched it with city funds, raising almost $1 million to continue that type of testing. So we got some things done.